Boom, what's up everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakian. Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with David Solomon.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thank you for coming onto the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Alan.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I love your color.
Yeah, it's fun just to dress in the interdimensional, intergalactic, fun be a paintingness.
Exactly.
So people say this is more like festival clothes, and I like feeling life is a festival.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that the more colorful my sock drawer becomes, the more colorful my life becomes.
I think there's a lot of magical resonance in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your life is so colorful.
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of psychology with color and a lot of energetic stuff with color.
Yeah.
If you think about chakras and chakra attunement, Spirit Science says this really well. They have like this 42-minute series on chakras, and they say if you want to take in the energy of a certain chakra, like your core for will or red for passion, root, grounding, wear that color, be surrounded by it. So it goes a step further. If you wear all colors, you can sense, feel, see, and bring in. And a lot of times when people bring all back, what they don't know is they're insulating themselves energetically. So we may not be taking energy in, we may not be putting energy out. It can be protective, but can also be kind of really like isolating, not really pulling that stuff in. And if you think about the personalities and the vibes of people, who walk into a room, just all black suits versus the bright, colorful stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot that can be done there.
You're already rolling right into it, and I love it. I love it. So for those that don't know, David has a background teaching and learning, and especially in magic. Magic is Real is your page. You guys are over 100,000 people have liked the page and are engaged in it. So you're obviously pushing out content that people enjoy and that they find to be a little bit ethereal, mystical, spiritual, things that are definitely not, like you said, the suits, the dark colored suits with ties, but more so these colors and why they access us to these different dimensions of reality that we may not be tuned to all the time. Actually, maybe this is important now since we're already here, but the idea that what we think is a direct part of how we experience life. So, for example, having this super rational, logical mind all the time versus having the super emotional and feeling and vulnerable mind all the time. So is there a way to balance those out?
Yeah, I think Alan, for each of us, it's different. Like, it depends where we're coming from. And there's nothing wrong with wearing suits and dressing in black and being monochromatic. I mean, it can work very, very well in certain contexts, just for the energetic anchor that I personally use, that I personally like. I find that a lot of times there's anchors of consciousness for who and what we are and what we want to be. If you think about what is a life, what is our life, we could have our intent, what we design, what we wish something to be, and then flow, what we feel is true for us. So intent is more, I'm going to decide what my purpose is, I'm going to schedule out my day, I'm going to get these things done, I'm going to wear this specific type of bracelet that works with personality integration of past, parallel, simultaneous lives, and astral projection. Wearing this has an effect. It also is a reminder for me to keep my consciousness on those topics because I find they're very useful for what I'm doing right now.
And you're wearing something that reminds you to tune into your past, present, and future lives as well as astral projection. Now, most people obviously don't think about those things. So can you unpack that for us? What do you mean by past, present, future lives and astral projection?
Sure. So the short answer is, in 3D linear, regular, everyday time-space reality, time kind of goes like this. Past is over here, future's over here, and we're right here in the now. But if you think about reality as a whole, a lot of the spiritual teachers and leaders, a lot of the great ones say there is only now. And time isn't like this, which is horizontal. Time is like this, which is vertical. So it really depends on the orientation that you want to have. If you think, oh, you have a past life that was a genius scientist, or a rock guide, or a fashionista, or really fit, or really inspiring, or a great romantic, and you want to tap into that past life or tap into it for some other reason, maybe to heal a wound, affect your personality in a certain way, then it's much easier to think of, lives and lifetimes, not just, oh, maybe 3,000 years ago I had this incarnation in ancient Egypt. I have to get a hold of that name and that identity, realizing that it's all now. If you go ninth dimensional unity where everything is one in the system of magic that I teach.
Okay, we got to break down a little bit more because this is, again, let's start unpacking more. So
sure.
This directly relates to reincarnation then. Is that true?
Yeah. Do you want me just to wrap up the tiny bit of astral projection?
Do that, and then we got a ninth dimension, and then we have reincarnation. Yeah, so let's do those.
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of maps.
Yeah.
So when you, as awareness, not mind, not body, but you as awareness, shift your perspective really fully to something other than your immediate physical surroundings, you can call that astral projection. And you can get very accurate with it, and you can also call it remote viewing in certain systems. And when you're accurate with it, you can see things accurately that may not be right in front of you in this time-space reality that you're in. And so a purpose of something like this, or colors or things to remind you, and the value of all the past life stuff, and what we're about to get into, is to really become whole. Who are we, and how is that useful? How does that play into magic? And the last thing is, what's the everyday practical value of all this stuff? Is it just philosophy? No. Is it wishful thinking? No. It has actual practical value in affecting our life in the day-to-day, and it's very handy.
So our physical reality is what is in front of us, and that is limited to the three-dimensional reality that we experience here. And what we are describing right now is we're describing things that exist outside of our perceptions of light reflecting off of objects and us perceiving it, smelling it, tasting it, etc. So astral projection can then be summed up by saying that is just removing your thought from your skull into other areas.
That's a component of it.
Okay.
So we have all these dimensions overlapping, and without getting into all of them, we have the 3D world, like time, space, matter, materialism, stuff we pretty much understand, and we're using science to understand it and control it more and more, but we pretty much have an understanding, time and space. So what astral is you can say astral energetic. I use the same term in my system, and that's fourth dimensional stuff in my system. So in the third dimension, to travel, you walk across the room, you get in a car, you get in a plane.
Yep.
What does it mean as your astral body, as your soul, psychic stuff? What does it mean to move or shift? Well, it's not the same time-space map. You can have a lot of overlapping energies. Between my hands, astrally, there can be energies of fire, electricity, magnetism, earth. There could be dinosaur poop 65 million years ago in the same space-time chunk right in this little pocket. And so when you do astral travel, astral projection, you're taking your awareness and you're moving it elsewhere. And so that elsewhere, you have two ways of looking at it. You have the astral and then you have the physical. And you can unlock a lot of doors once you realize stepping above the third dimension, you can access all of it, all of time and space, with the right training and practice and validation, which is really key to show the difference between a delusion and an actual perception.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. Body has to travel to the bathroom, or body can travel with its soul, with its spirit, with its energy to a different location.
Yeah, I mean, everything's a fractal of everything else. So a lot of times, if people are on a certain type of journey or have enhanced perceptions, we see fractals, we see mirrors. We've heard the phrase consciousness is a hall of mirrors. So the physical world mirrors the astral and vice versa in certain ways. Same with the causal karmic, same with the seventh plane, which is where our divinities hang out mostly. And it's nice because then we can use one reality, our main third dimensional physical reality, as a mirror and a bit of a map for understanding everything else.
So how do we use the three-dimensional reality as a mirror for the fourth dimension? How does that work? How does that mirror work?
Yeah, so I'll use healing because that's something most of us have access to. So if you see an energy healer, somebody who's actually really skilled, has some good training, has been practicing for years, their clients say good things about them, not just somebody who says, ooh, I do energy healing, or I got a Reiki initiation, but who actually does it. And you come to that healer. This is something that happened to me actually a couple years ago. I had this intense pain in my wrist. And I said, what's up? What's with the anatomy, the tendons, the ligaments, the tissues, the fascia, the muscles, all of it? Did I do something? And they said, put your awareness on your wrist. And I put my awareness inside my wrist. And immediately all these visions came to me of some past trauma, which I don't want to get into in detail. I can if you're curious. And as soon as I felt those and stopped trying to avoid them, avoidance is a huge topic in a lot of types of healing. And I allowed that energy to finally be processed and I stopped resisting it, the pain actually went away to about 80%. I think it's really critical to measure this stuff. Very few people do. And then the next day, maybe 2 or 3% was left, like a ghost of a remembrance, but it was all gone. No physical contact whatsoever, all awareness. And so you can say, if you want to stick strictly 3D as a strict skeptic, oh, you just found a great way to engage the placebo effect, and all this stuff is an anchor for that. And if all you want to do is stay super, super grounded in only this reality, then yeah, magic is just hacks of the placebo effect, which is pretty much unlimited. It can cause cancer, it can reverse cancer, but when you get into the astral, you start explaining the mechanism of action. You start explaining the tingling, the warmth you feel when you do Qigong for real, or when an energy healer is working on you and you notice something. And when you get to the astral energetic, there's all these ways of describing it: Qi, Qi, Prana, Shen, Yin energy, Yang energy, all this stuff.
What would be the astral explanation for the removing of the pain from your arm?
The astral explanation is that the astral world mirrors the physical one. So there's part of my soul embodied, inspirited, inspired. There's part of my soul in my wrist. And because we're holographic and souls are infinite shapes and we're all one, and if you go up dimensionally high enough, this television is just as much of a soul as you or me or our hands or these chairs. But so the part of what I believed was my soul, or the soul, that the awareness was causing to focus here was some trapped trauma, something that I was avoiding. And so by really seeing that and feeling that and processing that, the draw for attention, the pain left. And so that has a couple different meanings. One meaning is we can heal our bodies through healing our spirit, as the Ancient One said to Dr. Strange in that excellent movie. And the other one is really looking at all this stuff as tools for enlightenment. In a very practical, very, very clinical way, defining enlightenment is just you don't really have attachments, you don't feel gripping compulsions, and emotions don't really lock. Now, I think enlightenment is a continuum. I think there's a lot to be said about it. That is not an exhaustive definition. But looking at that, we could say that doing that experience can take you to 0.00082% more enlightened, for one example.
So we can summarize by saying we're channeling our energy and our awareness to a part of our body to focus on it, to heal it.
I would use the term directing, because in a lot of systems, channeling has a specific meaning. But yeah.
Okay, cool. So now let's touch on, you said 7th dimension, 9th dimension, and then we got to get to reincarnation as well. So what are these different dimensions? 4th was astral, so you can take your energy, your soul, and move it around space-time.
Yeah.
Okay, what's 5 and 6 and 7 to 9?
So the fifth dimension in the map that I use, that I kind of invented and put together.
Is this an agreed upon map by, like, what the 11th dimension, isn't that string theory, right?
So every map is written by certain people, and it's up to other people to say, yeah, that's a valid map. And there's a lot of maps that
where do demons and angels and where do spirits?
Do you want to go there, or do you want to go back to defining the 5th? Because we can do either, but this is a 3-dimensional conversation, so I can't say both at the same time.
Yeah. Because
at least that's what's on camera. We're doing more, of course.
Where do those live as well? There just seems to be so much that lives in what we don't know. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to be able to pinpoint and describe it. And so I guess the first question then is, follow up on this, but there's nothing that's objectively agreed upon past 3rd dimension. Is that true?
I wouldn't even say the 3rd dimension is objectively agreed upon. You take 1,000 people and show them a specific color of purple, and you take out a Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore color deck with 80 shades of purple. And everybody's cones and rods are different. Some people might have macular degeneration, and say, can all 1,000 people objectively agree that this purple is, quinacridone violet 37 with cherries on top? There's probably going to be one person who says no, unless they're all paid or coerced or brainwashed or something to all agree. So in terms of objective reality, something that's objective.
Wow, you're talking about color. And I'm sitting here on this show talking about, can we get all 7.5 billion people to not kill each other?
Well, that's actually a bit of different thing.
It's so funny that you're saying you can't even agree on a fucking color, that one color is the same.
Well,
let alone can we get everybody to...
we relax about it.
Why do you want people to stop killing each other, Alan? Come on. Let it be. Go ahead. Go back.
So do we want to touch on angels and demons, causal karmic, objective reality. Which topic do we want to talk about first?
So difficult if we don't even agree on the third dimension. How
Yeah.
do we agree on anything past that? So maybe then there is a subjective.
Well, I actually have something to
Go
offer
ahead.
to you. I'd say that everything is a continuum between subjective and objective. And what is objective? I like the term consensus reality. So there's somebody living with me who I was training who had a mental health condition. They went off their meds. I tried to help them. I couldn't pass a certain point, or at least I didn't believe I could, and therefore that was the reality, however you want to look at it. And eventually they ended up in a psych ward after an intervention and a lot of drama. That person felt that their reality was 100% true, but nobody else did. They were outside of consensus reality. So for us to say this is black, we could argue for 10 hours if it's zinc black or Mars black, the amount of gloss. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. So if I share angels and demons, what I would have to share about that, or the nature of karma, or the fifth dimensional causal plane, or that I don't go to string theory 11th dimensional, although I recognize that as valid, and the simultaneous paradoxical truths we can get into there, reality can get really trippy. So what we do generally is we collapse the wave function, we agree to box certain concepts to be useful. So for example, if you're talking to a nutritionist and saying, well, how much protein should I eat if I want to maintain muscle mass and grow muscle mass by such and such amount? You'll get different things. Most consensus might say your body weight plus X. And there's other people who would say, well, you don't actually need that much protein. And so what ultimately matters in the world that I live in and that I teach, and the validation and agreements I've had from people who agree with this, because people can agree with or believe in whatever they want. I'm not attached to people following me or liking my stuff or agreeing with me. I just speak the truth that I perceive. Reality follows expectation. One of the first well-known channels was a woman named Jane Roberts, and she channeled a being named Seth, or who called himself Seth, in these books, Seth Speaks series, and the first was called The Nature of Personal Reality, the first to really make it big. And a lot of people, Esther Hicks, who did Law of Attraction, and they made The Secret based off of that story. If you really look into it, her interview with Oprah, they go all into that stuff. Reality kind of follows our expectations. So if you expect there's something about angels and demons, and you want to understand what is a demon, what is not a demon, what is an angel, what is not an angel, how do you work with these beings, protect yourself against them, are they projections of your inner self, are they shadows and light, are they parasites, are they just concept and form created by organizations to scare people and they're not even real?
But can you channel your thought towards things that are not objectively true and have your expectations go in that direction even though there's not truth, like the Flat Earth Society?
Yes, and so then we get into what happens when you don't share consensus reality. And so the Flat Earth Society, I'm going to use a more extreme example. I'm going to say...
Interesting. So then there's a bit of this consensus reality, and then on top of that is the more subjective reality that's usually outside of this third dimension.
Right. And what the scientific method is used for, where you have an idea, you test that idea, you confirm that idea is true or false, other people can do the same thing. The scientific method, in a very simple nutshell, is if I say angels are X or chi is Y, and the whole world says, oh, that's an interesting thought. Let's either test it experimentally or compare it to the 10,000 other people who have said that.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, even if it might be very hard to get all 1,000 people agreeing on purple or get all flat earth people on the same page as everybody else or vice versa, ultimately what matters is how do you use this stuff? How does it apply to you? How does it apply to life in general?
Yeah.
What's the value of it? And at what point are we satisfied with the science? Because science evolves all the time. You can have biased people, you can have botched experiments, you can have poor methods, you can have smaller sample sizes, you can have changes in the Earth's magnetic field, you can have different interpretations of language, you can have so many varying factors. Now we're understanding that consciousness affects reality. The Princeton Pear Lab and Stanford Labs and so many people measure consciousness. So consciousness as a factor, let me just finish real quick. With consciousness as a factor, it gets really tricky in terms of measuring experimental results. So you could test, will penicillin kill certain types of bacteria in a petri dish? Sure. Will a same amount of penicillin or whatever antibiotic kill the same infection in different bodies? Say they're exact clone bodies, identical twins, live the same life. One person is an optimist, the other is a pessimist. And because of that, from all the research we know about stress, the optimist has a higher T cell count, and the penicillin or whatever antibiotic does better in their body. And then they're healthier with their microbiome afterwards. So it really boils down to precisely what we're looking at and why. And so to step back a second and to not get so meta, because you can just get lost in that for your entire life.
That was a really good example of not meta. So is that a Princeton or a Stanford, or where was that?
Stanford has SRI and Princeton had the Pear Lab, which closed unfortunately. And in Petaluma, there's the Institute of Noetic Sciences, or IONS.
Noetic Sciences.
Noetic Sciences.
And then what's the SRI stand for again?
I believe Stanford Research Institute.
Research Institute.
Yeah.
And then they have a consciousness division within that?
Well, they had. A lot of organizations aren't public about this stuff anymore.
Because it's tough to study something that's so outside of the third. So that's a really good example, though.
It's actually not tough. There's a lot of reasons, political and industrial and cultural. One example that people can find if they Google it is a guy named Russell Targ was paid a ton of money by the CIA to look into this topic of remote viewing / astral projection, depending on the system.
Cool.
And he beat the silver market and got profiled in the Wall Street Journal for accurately predicting the silver market. Now, he had all these things that it couldn't be for personal gain, it had to be for the benefit of the world, but he was able to do something in a way that a major mainstream publication said, yes, this is legit. So the question isn't what science is there today that you can find and walk into a lab and say, show me how you can levitate this cat, or show me what she is, and prove it as true or false. So the whole James Randi thing, which I don't want to get into.
It seems to be the slow tunement into as much objectivity within the subjective realm as possible. These hypotheses being tested over time of the fourth dimension of astral projection.
It's less the testing, but more the adoption. So if you take the Matrix red pill, blue pill, and you look at the Matrix movie as a way of looking at our reality for just a second, if there's a country and that country destabilizes, people stop paying taxes, for example, that country falls apart. And yeah, you could say politicians spend money in inappropriate ways, and the justice system is imbalanced, and we could do a lot more for people in poverty, and corporations could treat their employees better. All the ways societies can be improved, but ultimately, governments provide safety, they provide infrastructure, they do good things, they do bad things, if we want to use simple words like good and bad. When you give too much information about objective reality, too much magic stuff, you kind of can mess with the system a little bit. Dean Radin, who was president of IONS, who founded it with Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, there's a lot of interesting stuff about him if you look in some of the deep parts of the web. One of the things that Dean said, and he just wrote an interesting book called Real Magic, I agree with some of it, don't agree with some of it. He said to me once when we were talking, if magic were ubiquitous, the world would last 30 minutes. And if you look into Hermetics, I'm about to explain. If you look into Hermetics, or the book called the Kybalion, Hermetics is Egyptian magic, Thoth, ascended master of reading, writing, language, math. If you look into Hermetics, Hermetics says high-level masters can start or stop earthquakes, which is believable. If you have really high-level ascended masters like Babaji and Autobiography of a Yogi, the guy who wrote that was Steve Jobs' guru.
Any scientist would pretty much say that you're crazy.
Sure, because it's really hard to get that in a lab, because how do you have a lab that can encompass an area and prove the causal link from consciousness to the earth?
Not just consciousness to the earth. Anyone can say, I'm feeling this tree, or I'm feeling these flowers right now. But to say that you can stop an earthquake, that is a whole different category.
Right, and so just to tie that up before saying the problem with science related to this, let's take for a second that that's possible. If you trained everybody to do that and took away the mystery in mystery schools, if you get ticked off from somebody cutting you off on traffic, or you get ticked off at your neighbor, the world turns to ash very quickly.
Sure. Okay. So then that's the idea, is that there would be a huge unleashing of power from within people.
Yeah.
Okay. So all right, let's go back just a little bit, because this is all extremely cool, and it's a lot to wrap people's minds around that have been just chilling in the 3D plane and trying to figure it out. All right, so initially you were mentioning past lives, present lives, and future lives. All right, because we still need to get into Magic's Real and everything, but tell us about reincarnation. How does astral projection relate to my ability to go into my past lives?
Yeah. This is a fun topic, and this is one that actually has been studied deeply. So the two resources, names, books I'd like to offer, Larry Dossey, D-O-S-S-E-Y, his book called One Mind, and Gary Schwartz, his book called The Afterlife Experiments. Gary Schwartz, University of Arizona for a while. Larry Dossey goes all over the place. Both of these guys looked at a lot of stuff. If you just Google evidence for reincarnation, and don't look at something heavily biased, there's a lot of biased stuff. You have tons of examples of little kids remembering specific details, where they were born, where they died, if they were murdered, who killed them, what the murder weapon was. This stuff was dug up. So I really want to tie this back into how is this practical and valuable. The earthquake thing, whether it's real or false, depending on what anybody believes, the value isn't very, very high for most people, but the value that is high is this past life astral projection thing. Because we're talking about what are you as a human being and what affects the quality of your life. And if you talk about enlightenment as having more of a light body, feeling more light, whether you call that lighthearted, whether you call it astral, you have all this energy, all this power, all this bliss, all this nirvana, or you just say you're at peace, you're at happiness, you're detached from the issues of the world, you might have preferences, but you're not attached to those preferences, and you are 100% in control of your emotions if you choose to experience them. Another very small sliver of a secular definition of enlightenment. So the value of this stuff is to expand your awareness and realize that you are awareness, you're a soul. If you get full awareness of a past life, you realize you're not your name, you're not your job, you're not your net worth or your net debt, you're not anything related to this life or this incarnation or that one. And you might have some trauma, some habit, some preference, some aversion related to a past life, how you lived, how you died, how you succeeded, how you failed. And if you do that a few times, especially in non-human bodies, which is interesting, then you start to feel this expansion. You start to realize you're eternal, you're immortal. Not saying that if you as Alan, get shot in the head, Alan will stop walking and talking. Likely he will stop walking and talking. But the you behind it, inside of that knows he is much, much greater than that, genderless, formless, it's a type of liberation and a freedom, which so far for most of my life, there's very, very little that can compare to that. So the value of shifting your awareness astrally, not even talking about other dimensions, which all exist simultaneously overlapping, to that past life, where you view it, you remote view, or you astral project awareness into that other space-time where you as Betsy Craig, for example, in your butter churn with blue turquoise shoes, married to an interesting man. I could just go into these little bits that are coming through. The value, the practical everyday value, 3D, it's psychological, higher quality of life, less suffering. If you're really scared of cats and you realize in a past life a cat that had rabies bit you and you murdered your children, something really awful, and then killed yourself, something really terrible, but you made peace with that because there's billions of people in the world, everything that can happen has happened and will happen. You come to peace with that, and now you're no longer afraid of cats or heights or the color red or of loud noises. And so 3D, it's a psychology technique. Now 4D, it's very interesting because as Betsy, and aside from butter churning, maybe you were very, very, very physically strong. And this life, you're less strong. And you can tap into a past life / simultaneous / parallel life, if you look at time like this, channel yourself, bring back that part of you that remembered strength. If you go to Cirque du Soleil, you see these contortionists and people who are acrobats have incredible strength. They don't have bulging muscles. Their arms aren't like huge and defined. They're like sticks. But they can do these things that rip people can't do. If you go to yoga, you take football players in yoga, they may not have the structure and endurance, and they can't hold poses for long periods of time that grandmothers can hold. So the other value is higher strength. So now if we go into what else is the astral, causal, and other value before we go on to your next topic, is what other abilities and qualities did you have that you can remember? Okay, you have the liberation, you have the inner peace, which some people search their whole lives for with a lot of substances, for better or for worse, based on how they define those words. And to use one example as a channel.
Ron, you have some thoughts over there?
The substances?
We can go into psychedelics sometime, but I want to stay on topic for now if we don't mind. But if you want, we can switch, sure.
Every time I do psychedelics, the visual is always the same, but the message is, oh, Ron's back again. Ron, why do you keep coming back here? What more do you want that we already haven't given you?
Yeah.
That's all. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, biologically, with a little bit of 4D, astral energetic, and some chi stuff from China, a lot of it, the types of energy in your body, you have qi, which is your physical energy, and you have shen, which is your spiritual energy. And there's many other types of energy. And a lot of psychedelics do a few things. They convert qi to shen, so they burn up your vitality, which you can replenish with food and sleep and stuff, boost it into your spirit. They can expand your aura, they can open your chakras, and they can sometimes release or metabolize into DMT, which your pineal gland, if it's healthy, which takes work to get there often, can release on its own, so you can see things. It's called the third eye because it can perceive light, astral light and other light, and so you can see into other realities. The problem with drugs, because you can get to those enhanced perceptions without them, and I have a whole model for this, and I teach this all the time, is it makes it really hard to tell the difference between accurate perception and delusion. It gives you access, it boosts your spirit, and I like to use a mathematical model for are psychedelics useful, and I can't legally recommend them, but I've had over 300 experiences with small doses and large doses. And I really very rarely use them. I almost never do now. because I like having the clean perception and getting there naturally. Say your baseline perception is 20. You can maybe feel chi if you work at it. And if you take LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, iboga, something healthy in a mature, responsible context with people who have been doing this for decades, who know what they're doing, have your best interests at heart, who are ethical, like all the appropriate safeguards. You know your biochemistry, you know your heart is okay, you know it's a safe space, you know all the appropriate intelligent stuff. You haven't done it in at least a month. Your system, your gut is kind of pure, so you're not going to have a negative experience. The dosing is appropriate for your biology. Most people miss that big time. The source is trusted, all of it. You go from a baseline of 20 to say 40. And you're tripping and you see stuff, or you go to a 60 and you're really tripping and you know it's not safe to like drive, much less walk in public, or you go to like 80 and you're totally wigged out and you're speaking other languages, or you're very clearly on drugs or in an altered state, or 100 and you feel your unity, you feel like you're God or you're the Messiah, you're all that is. Now, if your Shen is expanded widely enough and there's enough energy in your system, perceptionally that might be true, but then you crash back down to 20 where you were, and you have all the side effects of the recovery.
It's like the astronauts that go to the moon and then come back and they're like, what is there left to do?
So how I use stuff, when I used to use it, and when I still do,
up from 20 to 30,
I don't take
40.
a big dose, I only microdose on most cases. In other cases, I really prepare. So I'll be at, if my baseline is just like a 40, because I've been doing this for a long time.
We need to unpack a bunch of other things, and I want to be very conscious.
Let me just wrap it up then in about a
of
minute.
Time.
Can I?
Well,
because we were on it, and I want to answer a lot of people's stuff. I'll be quick.
Well, with where we were going with psychedelics, it's a lot of it is about our ability to access those, going from 20 to 30 to 40, even without the need of that. But it's good to have our mind expanded to those levels as well. We need to come back at least briefly to reincarnation, because we were talking about the accessing past lives and how cool that is to be able to do something like that. When one gets a pretty good understanding of history and they start parsing it better and better, they can almost see those time periods. They can feel those time periods. They can really be there exploring what those time periods were like for civilization. Now, is that my nervous system taking, because is consciousness localized in the nervous system? Is it then consciousness moves from nervous system to nervous system? Once it dies, how many seconds does it take to get reborn? All of that interesting stuff. Like, just get there for us quick.
So I'd say consciousness is generally the software that can always be upgraded and expanded. Your brain is the hardware. We always get new hardware. We get new phones every year or two.
How does the software move from body to body?
Internet, the field, the collected universe, source.
Interesting. So then the hardware dies, but the software goes through the fabric of the
more accurately, the hardware transmutes, and it's the software which actually matters. Like if you have a really important video that you shot, that video does kind of physically exist as data stored on devices, and you can beam it through the internet and email it to somebody, and then they have that video. All the hardware can go away, and that video could still exist as something beamed from one satellite to one station or something between fiber optic cables, and the video could be restored with new hardware existing. So while physical bodies can transmute into other types of matter, and not to be funny with language, but they don't matter too much.
Okay.
In terms of who you are as a soul. Like you cut your arm off, you're still you, even though you're a bit different. Your body dies, you as awareness are still you. As you expand your awareness, your body, your voice, your name, your identity matter less and less and less, because you realize you are so much greater.
I feel like you are a very strong expert in this understanding and these understandings, because you speak about it very multidisciplinarily, which is very difficult to not just fall into one vertical chamber. You have a very horizontal understanding of this, but you've also vertically went into the spirit. So how about this? Because I think this is important for people to get. We've mentioned it a couple times already. The applicability of magic is real. Where can we most easily apply magic being real? We were talking about pain in our body, being able to hone awareness to that part of the body and heal it. What other ways is magic real?
There's two ways of answering that. There's categorically and techniques. So categorically, it might be healing, enhanced perceptions, abundance frequencies or money magic, internal qigong, tantra, or working with sexual energies. Those are all different categories that are very, very practical, like money magic, like a lot of people want more money. Money isn't good or bad. It has the judgments we can choose to place or take away from it. And so when you get to techniques, what are healing techniques that are practical specific? What are monetary techniques? So this is what I teach in my school and my workshops and one-on-one training. Somebody will come and say, oh, I'd love to learn how to see and feel energy, or oh, I'd love to pull more money into my life. And how do we work on those things, along with any of the other topics I've mentioned, or a whole host of those, manifestation, reality creation, attracting a soulmate, for example. There's the physical, and then there's the metaphysical. So the physical, neurons, setting goals, taking care of these physical bodies, it matters. We're in the 3D realm. It's included in the all of reality, and then the astral, and then the causal, and then all the way up. So the practical value really depends on your point of access. If you want to get fit, say you're talking to somebody who's overweight, and they want to get fit very efficiently, most research I've seen says that the fastest, most efficient ways to get fit, aside from intermittent fasting and caloric restriction and cleaning up your diet, are either high-intensity interval training or strength training. You build up more muscle mass, you burn more passive calories, high-intensity interval training, right? If your body cannot take high-intensity interval training, there's something up with your joints, or you're in a wheelchair and you can only do high-intensity interval training with your upper body, then your access is different than you could say many other people you may know. So magically, I always work with people where they're at one-on-one and generally in workshops.
Got it.
And so if you have a practical wish, desire, intent, we would then say, okay, that's in this category, these techniques are ideal for you, and then we would kind of customize it. And just like any school, you have stuff that is shared digitally that everybody can get to, and it's mostly the same, and you can just choose what you pay attention to, and then the customization work, either the one-on-one work or how you individually choose to customize what you learn for yourself.
Are there any blanket advice for
Yeah, there's a ton.
Let's get some blanket advice.
I'd say if somebody wants to study magic and they never hear anything from me again, I'd say the most critical thing is to look for validation, is to look for consensus reality. So if you think you could slaughter a pig and draw its blood in certain shapes, and you're going to have people flocking to knock down your door and hug you and kiss you, good luck. But if you think you can pray and really deeply connect with the divine, and people will knock down your door and hug and kiss you, also good luck. If, however, you really truly deep down believe one of those two, hopefully the praying and connecting with the higher being, Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Mary Magdalene, any high-level spiritual being, a divinity you can connect with, or the one God if that's your philosophy. And a lot of people, a lot of sources have also validated that in consensus reality. Then you can grow in power, grow in impact, grow in power, lift more weights. So say you want more love, more people to hug you, you want more money, you want better, faster healing. If you work in a system that other people have validated, then it's much more likely to be successful, and you're much more likely to grow in power and complexity. So you want to learn how to heal wounds, possibly affect the rate or healing pace of cancers, strengthen people physically, strengthen you emotionally. You could take Tibetan Buddhism. You could take Reiki. You could take acupuncture. All of those are very big systems, and there's a lot of people who've said and written a lot. Now they've gotten diluted, and there are less credible people who say they think they know what they're talking about, and they may not. But the good thing is if you're a scientist and a researcher, you can find out the truth for you. So the most concise one takeaway I'd say is if you feel like you're a seeker and you want a truth, a technique, be broad, be general. Just like if you want to know the truth of what happened, and it's a political issue, it serves you best to read a liberal perspective, a conservative perspective, an independent perspective, multiple perspectives, to get to the objective truth, the consensus truth, to get the most data that you can. That's the first thing, and I can go on, but
that's great. That's a big one, and that's a good analogy.
And that's what I've done, Alan. Over the years, 28 years, I've studied magic in different forms. I'm biologically 33, so since I was 5, just been like focusing on it and looking where does Qigong overlap with Kabbalah, for example. Where does Hermeticism overlap with Christian Science or Christian mysticism? What stuff is mythological and metaphorical that we can draw from and interpret, and which is kind of like scary stuff or politically added on or culturally or one person added it and it isn't really real? And then how do we test this in our own bodies? And how does all of this stuff link? How is karma useful as a concept? How does seeing karma as something that doesn't need to exist, a useful concept? What is belief? What is expectation? What is faith? What is love? And exploring all this and looking at all the other definitions and then synthesizing them is something I've really, really tried to do. And then when I channel, interviewing right now mainly as David Solomon. When I channel, when higher source or self or aliens or ascended masters or divine beings come through me with whatever percent my ego filter can come through, I know there's a lot to unpack there, but just roll with me, then there's much more definiteness.
I like how you call it an ego filter. That seems like a really good way to put it.
It's so huge. If you look into channeling, Spirit Science has a cool video on it. There's a consciousness not in a body. Say, demigod Alan realizes himself, herself, their self as an expanded soul that's had 400 lifetimes, and you're aware of all those simultaneously. You have demigod awareness, just to use that very sparse definition for now, just to make it very simple. And I want to channel you. I want to channel demigod Alan. And demigod Alan says how to take care of myself. Or you're the voice of my intuition, and I hear your voice in my head. And you're the voice when I write or I type. And I say, hey, I'm channeling demigod Alan. How do we know that's true? It might work for me, and the information might be useful. The cool thing about channeling is people have channeled like specific stars.
Yeah.
And that's been validated. Other people do it. Or in remote viewing, you'll have multiple people remote view the contents of an envelope, double-blind stuff, and they'll get it right. Or like a nuclear silo somewhere across the world that hasn't been released, and those people haven't had access.
I love viewing other habitable planets orbiting stars.
That's fun. I've done that.
Yeah.
So getting into the practical, the useful, with the karmic and with like all this stuff in the simultaneous lives, and channeling. When you channel, it's, if thou art that, if you are one with the universe in theory, but until I can levitate that television, I'm not that television as much as I'm this arm, because I don't believe it, or else it'd be levitating right now, just as if I don't believe I'm one with gravity, even though conceptually, ninth dimensionally, that's true. Just to answer the paradoxes that don't really seem to make sense in everyday speech, which is one thing I've really worked on, is deconstructing paradoxes.
I think what you were describing earlier is a key point, which is taking in all of these different sources of information into your being, so that way you can have as much of a consensus objective understanding of what's going on in the world as possible. So whether that be with the 3D reality we live in, or once you start trying to fluctuate into what exists outside of it, tapping into as many of the sources as possible, talking to other people, learning about their practices, continuing to work on yourself over time in that, in the energy fields that exist outside of the 3D. And it's very cool to unpack this with you, and I think we're we're only at the tip of the iceberg, and the rest is all below the water, and there's so much there, and it's pretty much beyond the lines of perception what goes underwater, and it's really difficult to try and dig those pieces of the iceberg out and to connect into what is beyond this flesh vehicle existence. I love being able to talk to you about it, and I feel like, again, it's so difficult for people at home to practically put this into play. And I want to say that, a lot of really good ways to practically put it into play are to just go with the meditation. There you are. The magic is real. Yeah.
Would you like a brief answer to your ego filter and how that's useful?
I would love to. The ego filter is so fascinating. It seems like a lot of what exists outside of the 3D comes down to the ego at the 3D, and then the ego prevents from the 3D upward. The ego filter here prevents everything.
Interestingly enough, we use the singular term ego, but it's actually plural.
Like the ego of all 7.5 billion people?
Differently, but yes.
Okay.
So Alain Forget, who is a man in France who people have reportedly seen white lights hovering around, validated woo. A friend and teacher of mine studies with Alain, and he can mess with your perceptions, make everything dark except him. Very interesting stuff, like really affecting you through your senses. No drugs or plant medicines or whatever. So he uses a term I've seen in many places. It's a great term. It's called subpersonalities. So if you think about the type of you, who you are in front of your grandmother versus your lover, versus your ex, versus your parent, versus your child self. When you're angry, when you're not angry, Damanhur is a place in northern Italy. They use an Atlantean magical tradition I've studied with quite a bit. They talk about this as different components of you. So in the Chinese system, anger is associated with the liver and liver energies. You're feeling angry, you're feeling frustrated. So tying all this stuff together, one of you in a past life, maybe the part of you that is Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great or Napoleon or Hitler or Mussolini or whoever, that part of you that you can access that has anger, then acts on that anger, may be embodied in your liver. And the process of at-one-ment, atonement, integration, completion is you loving and accepting all of that and feeling it, and shadow integration work and all that stuff, not necessarily expressing it as the first idea that might come in with that signature, but seeing it all as one. So when channeling comes through, like the being which knows itself as David Solomon, born as David Solanda, that being has certain preferences and certain thoughts and certain aversions. And when that being allows himself to step to the side, higher stuff can come through. Now, when you look at an ego filter and you look at the truth of what's channeled, a truth with a capital T, right?
Yeah.
You could say Jesus was a being who had a very, very small ego filter, but a large and consistent ego, because that ego was generally always consistent. But there was no attachment. And what flowed through with Source was not subverted by a personality trying to be liked, trying to be appreciated, right?
Yeah.
So if David's channeling and something's coming through, and David wants to be liked, or wants to feel smart, or wants something else to come through, then David is essentially blocking the transmission, and the filter is at 10% or 90% or whatever. So when David says, look at 30 sources for stuff like this, unless you really feel that's true within you, that's a knowing of, hey, there could be a filter present. Because of the nature of ego, it's a bit self-defeating to say the ego filter is 1% or 80% present. There's some accuracy, but it's a very personal thing, and generally no one can know except the being speaking.
And as you're experiencing reality, the more that you enable yourself to fullest actualization without wanting to be liked or wanting money or thinking about that this or that, these external materialistic consumptive aspects, the more you're actually channeling this authentic being through what's existing outside of the 3D. Quick, just to probably as the last thing. Let's make this the last thing, and then if you want to end with something, go ahead. But we'll keep it quick.
Sure.
Robert Sapolsky wrote a book called Behave, and I think this is very interestingly aligned with what you're speaking about, because if all of the evolutionary forces that have led up to today are what I experience in my life, as in I have all of these bacterial cells within me that control me in ways that I don't know. I have these tendencies from either my genetics or my epigenetics or my past lives that have been brought into me today, that this sort of, I'm very interested in how these two things overlap with Sapolsky's Behave, and how you think that every moment you're in control, but really it's been these last billions of years of evolution that have put what you are on the planet, and what you think you have free will over, you really don't that much, intertwined with what exists outside of this 3D reality. I think those interestingly have really cool overlap.
They do, and I have I'll be concise. So there's a few terms I like with this. The first is surrender, and the other one is fractaline dominion. So surrender is kind of easy to understand. Mickey Siegel wrote a great book, Mickey Siegel, called The Surrender Experiment, talking all about surrendering to the flow, surrendering to the divine will. Yogananda, Jobs' guru, autobiography of a yogi author, talked about surrendering to Ishvara, aspect of divine will.
Yeah.
That's a way to unlock the power of flight, by the way, which that's a whole story about demons and angels and transmissions and visions and prophecy. But specifically, fractal, everything's a fractal, dominion, dominance. So you have a heart. Your heart has its own agency. It can act on its own. You, through breathing, through nutrition, through force of will, can affect the behavior of your heart. Your heart has dominion over the blood in your body. You have dominion over your heart and your blood. So your whole body has agency. You have agency over it. It's not too far a leap to believe yourself a cell in the body of God, or a heart of the great goddess. And so with that, you have surrender. What is my purpose? To pump blood. What is my purpose? To be a messenger of and help raise the power of magic in the world. And having my own agency, as your heart does, as your mitochondria do, as your microbiome organisms do. There's the components of free will within certain bounds. What ascension is, or apotheosis is, and it's in all cultures, there's the apotheosis of George Washington, founder of this country, went through the process, or at least worked on that, is your awareness raises. So you're no longer the cell, you're the heart, you're the body of bodies, you're the awareness beyond all bodies.
Yes.
That's ascension. And if you have an ascended master who heals somebody, or helps a plant grow really quickly, and people can do this even if they're not ascended masters. I've had the fortune of witnessing that occurring through me. I like that more than from me. There's a bunch of reasons for that. Or other people, whoever you see it. At the moment where it happens, or when it was raining and awareness shifted and then it wasn't raining, or the opposite, or animals were loud and awareness shifted and animals weren't loud, or there was no smell, awareness shifted and there was smell. I was the animal, I was the rain, I was the cloud, and the body, and the awareness, and the other stuff. So that's the higher level value. If you want power, if you want ability, for the purpose of realizing yourself as divine, not for parlor tricks, not for impressing people, not for distraction, which are a lot of common objections. If you really want that power to remind yourself and demonstrate it, and not everyone does, that's the value of the past life astral projection-ness, of knowing yourself as greater than a finite mortal being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's I love thinking about it that way, because we are greater than this finite mortal being. So many think that it's just death and that's it, and that whatever happens happens, but thinking about and tapping into what exists outside of it, and what it's a crazy process, and it's very difficult to put words behind. Words are so limiting. Feelings are even limiting in this sense. It's very difficult to unpack, and we've only started.
Right.
And is there something else like to end with? That
There's one thing that I would love to add. So I help people develop your natural psychic abilities. And Paul Selig, S-E-L-I-G, excellent author, channels, he says Melchizedek, many books, teaches clairvoyance, clairaudience. Words, synonyms, cultural interpretations, translations. If you want the true Bible, do you know Aramaic as well as the earliest people, or do you take the other stuff throughout the cultural perspectives? So we're in a world of vibration. We're in a world of source, and that vibration gets translated, sometimes inaccurately. You could say ego filter, you could say vocabulary. If you have a 14-year-old with an excellent vocabulary, words they haven't even read, that's channeling. If you have somebody who's 70 giving a great intellectually laden lecture, that could be all mind or that could be all channeled. So it's very interesting looking into this. But remembering that all is vibration, that this physical world is the grossest, the most dense, the most overt, the least subtle. So if you think about subtlety in flirting, and if I look at you and I say, hey, do you want to sleep together? That's not very subtle. But if I look at you and give you a look, that's a little bit more subtle. More subtle still is a bit of vibration, where you picking up, you don't even see me across the room, you think I might be flirting with you. And this could go for any person, any scenario. So how high up do you go? That's the dimensional model. And so if you want truth, realize that language is only one sphere of truth, and it can only represent. And so all the people who talk about enlightenment, nirvana, samadhi, satori as indescribable is because the words of language fail to capture the essence of the whole.
Yep. And now a good way to, again, tap into this is to try and meditate, try and feel, try and really, if you feel something in your body, just take the time to experiment with what it's like to draw your attention to that place. And just play around with things like this. When you hear astral projection, think about, what is it like if I try and move my mind right now to a different city, or near my mother, or near somebody else in the world? How would that feel like if I tried doing that? Just practicing these things and slowly inching our way forward. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, David, for joining us.
Let me give a few websites for people who want to learn this stuff.
Let's do it.
Cool. So
we'll
great
put
site.
them in the bio as well. Yeah.
Thanks. So a great website to learn astral projection / remote viewing is probablefuture.com. Excellent, trustworthy. Last I checked, $150. Just if you go straight there. Magicmoneyhealth.com is under construction. It's my website. I have Wizard School and blogs and book previews there. For my book Magic is Real. Patreon.com /magicaljoy. I have exclusive content, ways of teaching people little magical techniques. And the Facebook is facebook.com /magicalascension. And a lot of times if I have workshops, I post the workshops there and events, and there's some discussion that happens as well.
Amazing.
And anybody who wants to help, always happy to take names.
Yeah, exactly. So the content is now up. We will go ahead and have the links in the bio for you to check out. Definitely tap into David's sources as well. Obviously, for so much time that somebody has invested into being able to understand these things, it would be a great way to go through him to be able to tap into it ourselves as well. So, David, thank you so much for coming onto the show. This is only the beginning. Only the beginning. There's so much more left. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to go into this process of digging and understanding and feeling.
It's so rich and gooey, and it can be really fun. Like, we didn't get into fun silliness, but when you astral travel and you can see intergalactic unicorns spinning the rays and the rings of Saturn and playing music as DJs, and having levitating cats fart sprinkles that turn into butterflies, trail colors that turn into planets where you have dominion of, and you can fly, and chocolate pudding, and you know, more and more and more.
That was the craziest stream of consciousness.
We can do that for an hour next time if you want.
That was the craziest stream of consciousness. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you had a good time with this content, give it a share. Please give it a share. Give us a subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Join us. Join our family. Join our movement to talk about thought-provoking things and get more people inspired to build the future. Comment below some of your thoughts as well. We'd love to hear from you and engage with you. Join us on Patreon. We need to support the studios, support the lighting, support the production, support the food, support the everything. Grow, join us, grow with us. Patreon.com/simulation series. Thank you, Ron Vargas, our producing partner. And we will talk to you guys soon. Peace.